What do you feel like made you willing to have difficult conversations?
There's a couple of things that you have to be willing to do to have hard conversations. One is to feel your feelings.
How did that influence your own level of boundary setting?
I would say when I was young and I started out teaching at 22, I didn't really have a comprehension of boundaries. So I think I was pretty, not great.
Welcome to Legacy Lounge, the podcast where you'll discover how to lead with purpose and build a legacy that matters. So if you're ready to step into your full potential, show up authentically for yourself and others, and create a lasting impact on the world, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to an episode of the Legacy Lounge, where we explore stories of powerful transformation within leaders. Today, I am honored to introduce to you someone who embodies what it means to lead with both fierce courage and a very profound heart. Today's episode is a part of my Prescriptions to Purpose series, where we're diving into stories of leaders who have traded numbing their pain for fueling their purpose. Meet Diana Vitantonio, founder and solo owner of Yoga Nyla, where for 25 years, she has been doing far more than teaching yoga. She's also been teaching life. And I have been honored to witness this firsthand. Diana is a walking testament of an underdog spirit, someone who has fought like hell through trials, tribulations, and rebuilt herself multiple times. What makes her extraordinary is that she's learned to amplify her voice, not for ego, but for good. As the solo studio owner since 2022, Diana made a choice that defines true leadership. She couldn't run away from hard conversations or responsibilities anymore. Here's a quote that I once heard her say that I had to capture for this introduction. Diana said, "I am working my butt off when no one is watching so that when people show up, I can show up with integrity." That right there is raw, real leadership, and that is a lasting impact in the making. Diana's journey includes moving from corporate leadership to entrepreneurship, choosing sobriety, rebuilding from burnout, and transforming inner rage to inner wisdom. She's trained hundreds of yoga teachers, authored The High Voltage Life, which I have right here, and she supports women in reclaiming their self-worth. And she is a true leader who consistently shows up with intention by choice. Today, we're diving into her 25-year career of leadership evolution, the hidden costs, the breaking points, and the transformations. This conversation is going to be one you don't want to miss. Diana, welcome to the Legacy Lounge.
Thank you. Thanks, Brin'na. Thank you for that beautiful intro. Wow. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you on here, and I could go on and on about you in a magnitude of facets. So I am excited for today's conversation. And I'd like to start us off because 25 years is quite some time. So in the world of yoga teaching and instructing, paint us a picture of what success looked like in the early days when there was a packed class and money in the bank and things just seemed like they were great.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I even thought of myself as super successful way back then, but I did recognize really early in my career that a lot of people were coming to my class. And when I started, obviously, it's not the case anymore, but when I started, I was the young one. And everyone that I was working with was, in my opinion, more experienced and wiser. And here I was teaching yoga and yoga philosophy and life skills, not just fitness, but that to people. And I was getting a ton of people in my class, like double than anybody else. And I started to kind of see that happen, and I didn't really um, understand why, but I noticed it. So I think there was that. I also, as a young woman and as a young yoga teacher, I was married to someone who came from a lot of money. And so I didn't really necessarily need to make a ton of money at that time because I didn't really want for anything. I had, I was able to get all the things that I wanted. So that, I don't know. That's just what I thought.
I think that's a perfect introduction to what I'm curious on and peeling back the layers underneath that. And so having the ability of financial security, allowing you to live life the way that you want to live it and some, but not out of fear that I have to do this because I need money to put food on the table today, are two very different perspectives of mind. And I know from some of the sharing that you have done and what I've been able to learn from you is that evolved over time.
Yeah.
And so starting out as one of the youngest in the rooms and having, it can be intimidating when you might have more people in your class than maybe the owner at that time, or maybe the most experienced teacher at the studio at that time. And I'm assuming from, again, my perspective of my own experience and understanding what this might have felt like for you as that young person who really had it all going on and had the security and had the psychological safety and like kind of knowing things are good right now. How did that influence your own level of boundary setting? Or do you feel like now maybe they didn't exist and that is kind of what put things into a ripple effect later?
I would say when I was young and I started out teaching at 22, I didn't really have a comprehension of boundaries. So I think I was pretty, not great at boundaries. But being someone, and I always have to thank my ex-husband for, my current life, because he allowed me to, yoga trainings are not cheap. They're thousands of dollars. And because of my lifestyle, I was able as a very young woman to take training after training after training. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why I am a teacher that I am today. And it was also because of my financial status as a young woman that I was asked to be a co-owner of a yoga studio at age 24. I think if I didn't have that financial status, even as a good teacher, I don't think I would have been introduced into that. So I believe that's what made me a young entrepreneur. And also, a very successful yoga teacher at a young age, as I was able to do a ton of trainings and I was able to kind of jump in. Now, I didn't really have a ton of boundaries at that time, but what I think I was always was kind of like a yes person. And maybe that's also a gift in a way, because I was like, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I will do that. Yes, I will do that. And so I kind of allowed myself to just say yes and fumbled through that, but that's life. So I feel very fortunate. I do.
I love that example. And I think it's interesting to me that you mentioned the age of 22 and acknowledging the scope of what having boundaries actually means or feels like, or how that plays out in your life, but also with considering the boundary angle of just saying yes for the sake of saying it and having that free spirit of, yeah, sure, I'll try it. Or yeah, I can take on one more thing. And what's interesting is from the lens of my audience who tap into Legacy Fulfilled. They're all different generations. And there's a shift happening right now where I believe it was Gallup released the report that stated 63% of the workforce, which all in workforce, in leadership positions, 63% is going to be made up in 2025 of millennials, Gen Z, and Gen X. And a lot of conversations and topics are rooted in why they feel a certain way that they feel, which in some of the articles that have come out are all tying back into boundaries or lack thereof or lack thereof awareness. And so I'm curious, throughout that beginning part of your career, at what point did you start to realize that the outer success that you saw that you had or that you were experiencing that you had, when that started to have friction with the inner peace and that those two weren't matching up? Is there any maybe acknowledgement of when that started, or maybe it started and went over time and then you look around and you're like, holy shit, how did I end up here? And it takes a lot of work to start to piece that back together. So I'm curious of just some context around the outer success and the inner peace kind of not meshing.
I feel like when I really started to feel unhappy in my it was in my relationships with other people. So I want to say, I was a co-owner of a yoga studio at age 24, which means I had a business partner, and I'm still friends with her to this day, and I love her. But at that time, I did not know how to have my own voice honored by myself, obviously, and so I felt like I did what she wanted to do, even if I had a different opinion. And I think after not that long, it was less than 2 years, I realized I'm not happy here. And so I walked away from that position, and I didn't open up another yoga studio around town because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. And I don't know if it would have hurt her feelings, but that was just my viewpoint at that time. And then I moved away, I moved across the country, and I opened up a yoga studio, and I had another business partner. And that one was really hard for me because my business partner at the time really was needed to be in the power position. And I allowed that to happen. And so when I wanted to have a weekend off, I wasn't able to do that because she told me no, and I wasn't strong enough or have enough boundaries to go, well, what? I need a weekend off, and I'm 50% owner, so I can say that. And I didn't have the strength to do that. So that relationship also didn't last for very long. And I did feel unsuccessful in my first 2 goes at owning a studio. And it took me a long time to recognize, what do I want? How, and have the self-esteem to go, oh, I could do this. And now I do it. Now I'm owning it on my own. And able to make choices and believe in the choices that I'm making.
Well, I think as a student of your studio, in observing you not only be so involved in regards to being present at the studio and teaching frequently at the studio, I also recognize how happy the team holistically that works in there operates as a team together. And I think coming from a leadership position, I innately pick up on odd things that probably aren't normal to the common eye. But even someone stepping out for a vacation and then coming back, but then traveling for something for work and then coming back, and being able to live their life and show up. And when they are there, they're expected to give 100% and they give you 110. That type of relationship isn't something that just happens by circumstance. I think that people show up and they do a good job when they enjoy who they work for and who they work with. And you've got a really strong team in that studio, in the way that they function together and in the way they represent themselves and the way they represent the studio inside and outside the building. And I think that the story of how, as a studio owner, felt previously when you couldn't push back, or you felt like you couldn't say no and fight for a 50-50 partnership, that's a really hard place to come from. And feeling like you are entitled to the 50% that you have of that 50-50 partnership. Do you feel like when you think about the 50-50 owner split and not being able to fight for yourself or speak up for yourself or push back for yourself at that time, do you feel like that silencing turned into stress in the body or stress in your life that was tied to feeling like you're stuck being silent?
Absolutely, 100%. And there were, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I did have a ton of stress in my body and in my life. I didn't feel as vibrant and healthy when I was young. I feel more vibrant and healthy now at 47 than I did when I was in my 20s and in my 30s, for a lot of reasons. But I do think that was it, like shoving down my own voice and not able to. And I don't want to blame anyone. I want to take responsibility. I didn't know how to go, hey, let's have this conversation, or I need to have this conversation, and this is what's fair and this is what's right. And I think also too, it's like, when I said I didn't have a ton of boundaries, I was like, yes, let's do that. So when it was like, let's open up a studio, yes, there was no contract, right? There was no prenup. There was no plan. And I would never do that again. Like, I got a prenup when I got married. I signed a prenup when I got married, but I didn't plan for what would happen if it didn't work out when I opened up two businesses with partners, and it was like things were not clear. So it wasn't clear what was going to happen as we kind of moved into the relationship. And if there's one thing I would say is like, sign a prenup.
I would agree with that.
Marriage, like, yes, prenup. Yeah.
I think, what's interesting about that is I had a leader at one point throughout my career, and he's hysterical, and I refer to a lot of his leadership philosophies in my teachings, but we used to talk about ideas and in the creative space of, okay, how are we going to, roll this out to a team, or how are we going to execute this project? And I would get so fixated on, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then go do it. And he used to tell me, he's like, Brin'na, I want you to think that this is the dating period. You're not married yet. This is the trial period. We're going to try some stuff. We're not fully committed. We can change our minds. We can change direction. But when you choose to get married, then we also have to have the layer of protection. And then we get into these conversations around the worst case scenarios and what could happen. That doesn't mean that it will, but it means that you're in reality that no one knows what could happen. So worst case scenario, you got to have a plan to protect yourself. And when I think about the tie of having a plan to protect yourself, but when you're in that spot of feeling stuck and feeling silent, I know for me, it was a lot of, I think, burnout as a bucket theme can get watered down. But the reality is that I was very depressed. And I was having night terrors, and I would wake up in a pool of sweat thinking that I peed the bed. And really, I was dreaming nightmares of living in my job all day. And those conversations that I knew I wanted to have were like haunting me, and hearing whispers in my gut of just like, this isn't right. This is when you should have asked the question, you should have, what happens if you bring this up? And I just kept trying to silence those whispers until I physically couldn't anymore. And I do think now, in a high stake, high stress situation, my body knew way before I actually could be in a state to admit, I'm not okay. This is not working. I got to make a change, before I even realized what was happening. And I'm just curious from a respectful acknowledgement place, like, how have you been in that space of ignoring signals or whispers or feelings, and how long of a period did you stay in that space? Because I also think that's different for everyone. Some people stay in that space and they're stuck forever, and they just need reminded it's a choice that you can get out of there. And it takes a lot of work, and it's not pretty, but you can do it. And other people might be entering that phase and they're like, something's off and I don't know what it is and I don't know what to do about it, but something doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I think it takes an experience for every person, and it's not going to be an easy one. When something isn't working out for you the way you planned it would be, and to have the courage to say no and to leave is going to be one of the hardest things you can do. But then when you realize you'll be okay, I mean, I wasn't. I remember like wanting to leave my marriage for years before I did, and I still grieve my divorce. I loved my ex-husband, but it just wasn't right. And for either one of us, I'm sure. And it took me forever to leave. And then when I left, I think I got worse at first. And you have to just, I think, realize like I've survived. I'll be okay. I will keep living my life, and you just kind of have to realize you'll be okay. But I had all kinds of health issues when I was younger. I mean, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia before I was 20. I never got on the medicine. I don't have that anymore. I had gut issues. I had psoriasis. I had addiction issues, which was obviously me trying to numb the pain that I was in, and not kind of shove down something. So I had all these things going on with my body. And then, it took me some time. It took me a long time to realize like, oh, these things, might not last forever if I honor my own spirit. And like I said, I feel more vibrant and healthy now than I have ever.
I love it. Well, we're all happy that you are, and it is encouraging and inspiring to all of us. And I think for everyone, we navigate and handle different levels of stress through different tolerances. And I used to escape and run from them too. And I think having the voice of a whisper in your own head of, I'm not okay, or something's not right, and knowing it and choosing to stay in that and run is a really hard cycle to break, until eventually it's not a whisper, it's a scream, and it pushes you to a breaking point. Mm-hmm. And I think that tolerance level for everyone is different. But what I love about getting to know you is different facets of how those whispers or screams or moments became a choice. And in that moment, you chose I'm going to do something different. I don't know where I'm going to start. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this isn't good and I'm going to change it. And you have recreated yourself stronger and stronger and stronger. And I would kind of love to transition this topic into breaking points and the rebuilding of what that looks like. And having very pivotal partnerships throughout your entire career. I believe you said you were 29 when your business told you, or your business partner had mentioned to you about filming with your mentor. And this was from our prior conversation with leading up to this interview. And I found that to be very insightful. And when I correlate that to a leadership platform for any leader at any capacity or any level of a team, I would just love to get in your mind of kind of what was happening in your body, in your mind, in your heart when you heard the words no. Like you can't film with your mentor, with good intention behind it or whatever that looked like. And kind of what did you feel when you were told no?
Well, rage. Rage. Yeah, I didn't know how to, I feel like when someone crosses your boundaries so deeply, that's the common feeling that someone probably is supposed to feel, is anger or rage. And I think at this point, it was not the first boundary that felt like I let someone cross with me. And so it was, I felt kind of that feeling of rage. I didn't really know how to access it or have a honest conversation. But I got invited to film a video with my mentor, and I remember my business partner at the time, it wasn't that she said you can't do it, but what she said that is I couldn't be away from the studio for more than like a day or two. So I literally flew to Boston, shot the video, flew right back. I mean, I was like there for less than 24 hours, which was very hard on me physically. It was hard on my body. It was hard on me physically. And there was no like break, but it was so important for me to do it. And I felt like I had to listen to her when she said that I, couldn't be away from the studio for like more than a day. So.
Okay. So what I do think what you just shared around asking your partner, 50-50 partner, or asking your leader for something around time off or travel or commitment that is for not only that ties into your career in the business that you were building at the time and now have built again, but as a personal goal and aspiration for yourself, and being told no, even for 24 hours out of the work environment, is what I would say as a leader, really not the right thing to do to retain your people, because people work for people. And especially when it ties into your future growth and impact that it can tie back into your career, that's a really hard place when you feel like you have to beg for time that you've not only earned and deserved, but likely also have a bucket of. And I talk with a lot of leaders who say, I'm plugged in 24/7 at 365 and I never have a break. And I was on my honeymoon and my boss was calling and I was on vacation with my family or at my mom's 80th birthday. And I'm dealing with follow-up from work. And we try as humans to stretch ourselves so thin because we have to fill that inner drive, fulfilling bucket that we want. But we're at the mercy of our leader who might not even understand why it's important to us to begin with. And I think what's interesting is we, like you did, we get on the plane and we fly and we put the stress on our body. We take the sleep from ourselves. We take our routine out of whack to still make it work because it means something to us and it's important to us as a human being. And then we show back up for work the next day and still have to give that 100% as we're drained. And that's a constant battle of trying to prove I'll figure it out. And it might come at the expense of myself and be exhausting. And that place of feeling like this is wrong and I'm going to do it all for a really long time, of staying in that space is a hard thing to balance.
Yeah, I mean, I was so burnt out in this position. And, you know, one of the things that I will say, and again, this is me and my lack of boundaries at the time, but this was a 50% partner. And this was a yoga studio that we both owned, and we were both yoga teachers. And first year, I taught, I think, 8 classes at the studio, managed the whole team. She taught none.
Yeah.
And then there was like a third partner in there, and he taught none. They had another studio. They were a husband and wife team. And they had another studio that and I'm not saying they didn't give some things to the studio, but physically they were never there. And then, so I think the second year, maybe there was like one class that they each taught there. And that was it. And I was unable to go, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was unable to say that. And so I think, you know, the rage that I felt was more towards like, stand up for yourself, Diana. And eventually, of course, that relationship didn't work out, because I'm positive both of us were guided that this is not a healthy situation. Like, someone, you're not honoring the spirit of everyone involved. And so it's like, you know, you will be guided to leave or have someone leave. And so it was actually her that asked me to leave. And it was like the rug was pulled out from underneath me, because here I had spent every ounce of my spirit working on this project. And it was like, see, we don't want you anymore. And it was like, what? I mean, I went through a serious depression. Like, serious.
You know, when you were first formally or officially asked to leave, what was that like?
I was completely in shock because, you know, building that business, you know, the strange thing is that the business I own right now is the same building, you know.
Full circle moment.
You know, so, and like, here I am, like, in it now. And it's this really beautiful community. But, you know, when I started in 2009, teaching to one person, teaching to 2 people, and then a year and a half later, like grinding it out, a year and a half later, the room had 80 people in it. It was full. Like, I still have pictures from way back then, mat to mat. Like, you couldn't squeeze another person in the room. And then from my partner to go, okay, we don't want you here anymore. It shocked me because of it would be I thought it would have been a different story if there was no build, right? Like, what if I couldn't build it? But I did build it. And then after I built it, they were like, see ya. And it felt such a betrayal to me. I mean, the betrayal level was enormous. And I really was just like, whoa. I mean, I'm getting emotional thinking about it right now. I mean, it really rocked my world.
You know, I first of all, thank you for sharing this, and I can feel it and I can see it and I can very much relate to it. And I think what's interesting is having the partnership headline be 50-50 partner. That's pretty self-explanatory. And to have a feeling like if 50% is mine, 50% is yours. We're in this together. We are a team. We are a partner. Very similar to saying yes, like a marriage, but in a business. And I've talked to quite a few leaders who are in a space where it's really hard to define that business is business and it's professional, personal is personal. And as much as we don't want those lines to cross, they do. And they do with lack of boundaries. They do with lack of awareness. They do with saying yes to the wrong things and saying no to the wrong things and the right. And we learn through it. But I think when I zoom out and I think about feeling like a number, my corporate experience was working with Target. And when I exited, it was like I literally was a number. And the doors closed and they opened the next day. And obviously Targets across the nation kept operating. And it was like I never existed. And mentally, man, that was tough. And I feel that element of surprise as I'm listening to you of the wrongful doing in how that was handled and the weight that probably came with that and the struggles personally to not only pull yourself out of a place of like, what did I do? Why do I deserve this? What did I do wrong? Because thinking about 80 people in a classroom is crazy. And if you haven't been to Yoga Nyla on a weekend, catch a class because there is nothing like it. It is an experience like none other. And it's packed and it's energetic and it's fun and it's rejuvenating. And I can't imagine seeing that progress of one student eye to eye to looking at multiple people packed to the point that you can't fit one more person in that room and still being told this isn't working, goodbye.
Right.
And the inner dialogue of, I'm not good enough or what did I do wrong? And all of that probably came into play at varying degrees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll never forget one of the things that was told to me from one of my partners was that I was replaceable, which as a concept I completely get. And you and I know, and everyone out there who's listening knows that you can fill a spot, but can you duplicate a spirit? No, you absolutely cannot. And so, yeah, of course, like conceptually, yes. And yes, of course, if people leave, you replace them. Absolutely. That is that. And yet you might not get the same result. And what I know in the history of the studio from when I was there in the beginning and to like it declined in participation and in numbers. In fact, when I rebought the studio in 2022, they had built a wall in that room, which used to be 80 people, where, I don't know if I don't think you were there when it was 2 rooms. Were you at Yoga Nyla?
That was like my first 2 months.
Okay.
From the time I did my trial, it was like demolition within 30 days.
Yeah. So, you could only fit 50 people max in that room. So you wouldn't do that if you were getting 80 people in it. So it was interesting to see that there was a decline in participation and, like an overturning of owner after owner after owner. And then just this kind of like, Nyla, the reason why I named the studio Yoga Nyla means the successful one. It means champion. And I was like, we're going to be kicked down and rise back up, like build it up. And it just feels like so fulfilling to see like, no, I think I was supposed to be here doing this thing. And, yeah, you can replace me. Of course, I will be replaced again because I will retire at some point. But again, no one can duplicate your spirit. So.
An interesting correlation or I guess relatability point that I, for some reason, just now clicked in my mind together is as I'm listening to you and thinking about watching this like a movie, that I'm getting to see into when that happened and how it happened and what that looked like, is, to me, it sounds like that 50-50 partnership studio was at a peak. It was at, like, it's firing on all cylinders, success, and it was growing, and it was good, and it worked. And behind the scenes, it was working because of how much you were actively working, whether or not your 50-50 partner was working the same or differently or whatever that looks like, but you were all in. And at the top of when it should be the success, like this is what we were working to achieve, is also when you were asked to leave. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, knowing there's a lot going on in here that doesn't feel right to me, that doesn't feel good to me, that isn't what I want to do, but I'm committed and I'm going to stick through it. And staying in that fighter phase is exactly where I was when I left on my own from Target. And it was like the peak of success, and things were working, and it looked awesome, and it was great. And it was at the expense of, I got nothing else to give, and what's happening around me is not right. And I'm trying to communicate that, and no one is listening to fix anything. So do I just stay here and be miserable and know that this isn't where I'm actually supposed to be? And I don't know why I've never recognized that before, but I see it and I feel it, and I relate to that on a very, very deep level, because business, it is supposed to be replicatable and repeatable and sustainable over time. So people can come and go and the business carries forward. That's a successful business model, let alone if you can take it and go repeat it and grow it, that's even better. But I think with thinking about the turnover rates at different businesses and small scale solo entrepreneur up to Fortune 30 companies, people don't want to stay somewhere where they don't feel valued. And the job someone can come in and do, and they'll teach you how to execute it, but they don't necessarily teach you how to lead, and they don't teach you how to influence, and they don't teach you how to make an impact in a positive way. It's just, this is the job, do the job, go home. This is the job, do the job, go home. And I value so much in getting to hear insight into that phase of your growth, because I think it's just a testament to the fighter and the comeback and the strength in what Yoga Nyla is today. I love this. Yeah. I would like to take this kind of into like an awakening, if you will, of going into a place of deep grief. I will call it deep grief of the exit and the transformations that were happening, or the awakenings after that rage and anger set in. What kind of like awakening journey of what that looked like? Can you take us through that, and maybe what all you were grieving in that rebuild?
Well, right after I left that relationship, I got asked to leave, and I actually took some time off of working. It was like the only time in my career I think I had spent some time not working. And I had it's interesting. I don't think a coincidence, but I had slipped and fell and really hurt my back. And so I was a little bit, I could only walk slow. And for whatever reason, I was just like and I'm a fitness person. I like to move my body, and I couldn't really do much. So I was being called to go to this bike path that is really by the studio. And I lived in downtown Sacramento. I drove every single day to Folsom, which is about 30 minutes away. And I got in the summer heat. It's wicked here in the summer. And I would walk on this bike path And I just felt called to do it every single day. And I would listen to music on my headphones, and I would just cry and cry and cry and cry and cry and cry and cry. And I just felt like I have to do this again the next day. And then I really feel like this was like one of my major spiritual awakenings, where I was sitting down, I was crying, and I had, I don't know, this to me, I'll call it a God moment. Um, but, I was feeling, obviously at this time, I was feeling very abandoned and very victimized. And here I am listening to music, and I had felt this like presence of God. And I just knew that there was a part of me that was dying. And I knew that I was not alone. And I knew that all of this was part of my journey. And so I didn't feel like, and it wasn't anything that happened on the outside. This was this inner transformation on the inside, where I like all of a sudden was like, I'm not a victim. I helped create this for whatever, the big picture. And I had felt like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like there is this non-physical world that is right here with me. And it was, it happened in nature. It happened to listening to it was David Gray that I was listening to. I remember
I love it.
Yeah, it's just like that was like, I think my awakening. And I spent many years, like in the next few years of my career, just kind of rebuilding my own brand, which I was able to dedicate, creating my own style of yoga, working on the content of the high voltage life, which was how to build self-esteem and how to build healthy relationships, beginning with yourself. And so, I don't know if I owned a studio, would I have had that time to do all of that? I don't know. And so anyway, it all worked.
I love this insight. And I think when I hear you say that I felt a piece of me dying inside, like it was dying inside of me, and I wasn't alone. And it was this experience of waking up to myself on the inside. I think about why it feels like a loss. And I think about as a high achiever, which I know you are, and you've lived your life and the entire outlook that same way. When you have a vision and you have a dream or you have an aspiration and you go do it, it feels like this is what it's supposed to be and this is how it will always be. And when that rug moment, the pull out of the rug happens, and it destroys what you think you're supposed to be doing, it almost feels like, well, what now? Like I'm not capable of doing anything else. My skills aren't transferable, which skills are always transferable, but that's a different topic. But when you think about that vision and the dream of what you wanted and having that pulled away and just feeling like I am nothing, I am not worth it, I am bad, I am wrong. That is, I think, something that through the high voltage life teaching, I didn't recognize that self-esteem was actually something that I needed to rebuild. And I think anyone who knows me, family and friends, would look at me and say, her self-esteem is fine. Her self-worth is just fine. She's doing good. But as we got into your teachings, I'm like, holy smokes, have I been in left field? Like not even in the same ballpark as what I thought I was. And that lack of fulfillment felt like a major healing process in understanding that my self-worth and my self-esteem belonged to other people, and it was defined by other people.
Right. And that's not it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's not it. So,
You mentioned that your healing process and the time that you did have out was about a year. What do you think was most surprising about that time to yourself?
I needed it. Obviously I was burnt out. Um, I was experiencing really strong, deep emotions. I was going through a major thing. I think a lot of times people don't have time to go, I need to take a year off and heal. I feel really fortunate that I allowed myself to do that. I needed to do that. And one of the things I do know about coming into really knowing yourself and how you feel in your own voice is that you need alone time. Because what you need to do is you need to um, remove everyone else's voices from your head, everyone else's opinions from your head. And I do feel like that was such a huge creative time for me.
Yeah.
Creativity was just beyond. I mean, there's some times right now where I'm like, I wish I was as creative as I was during like those, kind of depressing times.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like busy and I'm in it now and I love my life, don't get me wrong, but it was like you almost need that alone time and that space to really kind of find that creativity within you. You can't be too busy, you know.
Yes. Coming from a addict of busy bee over here. No, you cannot be. You need to silence everything and limit the screens and just exist and go inward in order to find out what your own creativity looks like too. You mentioned on these walks, listening to music and to crying. And I believe it was previously becoming more emotionally available for yourself, let alone for others. And I'm curious, when the last time that you allowed yourself that type of release, when was that? Or is that something that you are in search of, maybe?
Well, I don't think I'm in search of it really anymore. And what I recognized then is, this is kind of what happens, in my opinion, is that when you suppress your emotions for a really long time, there becomes like a little volcano that erupts if you access those feelings for the first time. And that's when it is. And I don't know if I'll ever have a volcano like that, although I kind of long for that release and that feeling. I don't know, because I'm in a process now where I feel my feelings when they come now. So I don't necessarily have a ton of suppressed emotions that are going to erupt anymore like I did then. That kind of happened to me when I first started doing yoga too. I would have all these outbursts of crying and things like that. I don't know. I mean, it really hasn't happened like that in years for me. And there's a lot of times that go like, man, I love that. But why did I love it so much? Is because I was actually being authentic. But it was, again, it's like I had all this suppression that came up. So I feel like now I actually let myself feel things as they come, and it's not quite the same experience, but I think that it's healthy where I am now. And so I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever be like that again, but there was some gold in those moments for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think my first couple weeks as a temp sign up student pass, I'm pretty sure the only thing I did was sit on my mat and cry. And I had no intention of crying when I walked in, but I did. And I felt psychologically safe in the studio, in the presence of the instructors who were there, to actually tap in to myself for the first time. And I think you had just mentioned it. It was the internal that felt different. And so that volcano erupting happens when internal circumstance has to explode. It's at capacity and it's got to get out and it's got to work through its cycle. And I think in this piece now of kind of moving into like the transformative side of the other end of rebuilding and going through an awakening and looking at now your outer circumstances of what life is, you have a totally different internal circumstance navigation system. What do you feel like is different now? How do you know when you need alone time? How do you know when you might be headed on a path of going towards burnout, but you're not going to allow yourself to get there? But what kind of like cautionary flags or signs, I guess, do you look for that help you slow down to protect the work that you have done to get to where you're at today?
I think I feel edgy. I think I get like edgy. I feel like I start to recognize being short. You know, I start to see like if someone's like, "Hey, Diana, can you get me?" You know, like being a business owner, people ask me for things all day long and all the time. And then when someone asks me for something that's just a day to day, and I want to be like, "Shut up, get it yourself." Like I don't say that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That feeling, I'm like, "Oh, I need alone time," and I just like recognize that I need a little bit of space, you know. And my partner, my romantic partner, he also knows like if I come home and, you know, I haven't had a lot of alone time in a long time, and he can just kind of sense it in my face, and he just kind of lets me, you know, go off into the house and just kind of be by myself. And I usually can get through that in less than 24 hours, but I do need to take alone time. That's for sure. Yeah.
You know, I have a very similar meter of my internal responses, especially to questions. And I can think about when I was trying to prove, I don't even know what, to maybe myself or prove to anybody else, I don't know. But man, those edgy comebacks of like, "Are you freaking joking? Open your eyes. Why are you asking me this? Go do it yourself." Or "I don't know, go ask anybody else." That used to just send me right off the ledge into crazy town. And then I would just fester in it. And I recognize now how much I hated being alone, and I hated quiet, and I hated stillness, because it forces feelings to come up. It forces ownership and accountability and acknowledgement. And I ran from that as far as I could, as fast as I could, and never wanted to be alone. And now I crave alone time. And I love coming to the studio because no one can talk to me except the instructor. And I can do with it what I will. And I can push myself, or I can respect myself and know when to back off. And that feeling I didn't experience prior to coming into the studio for the first time. And I think, honestly, the moment that I stepped in and I didn't even recognize or know that you were the studio owner, and I'm like, "I want to join this place and I want to do this, and you are awesome. That was so fun. And I love your music." As I've gotten to watch your own evolution as a leader in the last year and a half as being a member of the studio, you have mentioned multiple times in having hard conversations or leading hard conversations, and even through High Voltage Life, supporting others in having hard conversations. What do you feel like made you willing to have difficult conversations?
I think there's a couple of things that you have to be willing to do to have hard conversations. One is to feel your feelings, to own what you're feeling. So if you feel disappointed, instead of or like just going like, wow, I'm like disappointed, let me deal with this. Where I think a lot of times people will not deal with it, and then it festers, and then the resentment comes, and then you talk to someone else other than the person you need to talk to, and so I just feel like the pain of having really unsuccessful relationships in my early years of my life had made me go like, no, I'm going to deal with this thing now. I'm not going to escape. I'm not going to run from dealing with it. So one is just like owning, taking responsibility, not pointing the finger and blaming, learning how to take responsibility for everything that I experience in my life, and then having the ability to communicate my feelings around the thing. And that's what I think you need in order to have hard conversations. And they're never like one of those things like, can't wait to have that hard conversation. It's just like, oh, this is like, it's like a bill I have to pay. You just got to like prepare.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Prepare and have the thing, and then realize like I dealt with that. I didn't run from that. I didn't try and escape from that. And that's a really positive thing. And yeah, I think a lot of times people will talk about something to something other than the person that can actually change the thing. So, like if you're disappointed with something, go to the thing. One of my mentors would call it like, go to your brother, go to your sister. Like when you have an issue, like go to that person. So it's really
especially if you want something to change, the only person who can change it is who you need to talk to.
Yeah. And you don't want to you don't want to be the person that when people are around you, all you're doing is complaining about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we would complain over and over and over about things is we're not dealing with them.
I would agree. And it festers and it influences everyone around you.
Yeah. Yeah. No one wants to be around negative Nancy.
No, not at all. They are exhausting. Exhausting.
Debbie Downer?
No. There's no time for Debbie Downers. I know when I was a kid and I would throw a tantrum, my dad used to say, every party has a pooper. I don't know who invited you to this party, but you're the party pooper. And then I would get even more upset. But negative Nancy's and party poopers are not allowed.
No.
Like they just not in my space.
No, you also don't want to be the person that talks very negatively about yourself. That's another, to me, like red flag with someone not really kind of dealing with something on the inside. Is like you don't want to be that person that's like, oh God, here I go again. You don't want to be that either.
Mm-hmm. I've heard you say once, and I believe it was from Jody, who also works at the studio. And she had said when she hears someone say something negative about themselves, her comeback is, hey, don't say that about my friend.
Yeah, Jody does say that. Hey, don't talk about my friend like that.
Yeah, that stuck with me. And it made me realize things that I do say or things I hear my friends say that historically I would have allowed or maybe not thought twice of. And then when I pause enough to be like, hey, don't talk about my friend that way, they're like, what? And then they recognize what they said. And sometimes they don't even know.
Right.
And that then can unfold into something beautiful in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's like unconscious behavior and patterning that people are just used to doing. And it's really great to say something like that might bringing awareness to them about it. But yeah, I mean, I've multiple times I've been like, you talking that way about yourself actually hurts me. And it's true. I mean, I feel that. I feel that in the moment, like, ooh, it doesn't feel good. You don't have to be talking negatively about me for it to not feel good. It's like talk negatively about yourself, and that doesn't feel good either. Or really anyone for that
Yeah.
matter. Yeah.
I've heard you say on different occasions that giving advice can be very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely agree. And I agree because I now understand why. But I would love for you to share some context around that for the listeners of the dangers of giving advice, because I also think leaders oftentimes tell advice of what to do to make a situation better or go do something. And it's coming from their perspective, not from the perspective of the person getting the advice. And I'm curious just for some insight around what the problem could be in giving advice and what to remain aware of when you either ask for it or when you could potentially be giving it unintentionally and giving it in the right regard.
Yeah, there's a difference between giving instruction and giving advice. Sometimes as a leader, you have to give people instruction on what to do for their job, let's say. Giving advice is something completely different. It's giving someone advice is disempowering to the person. And I think as a leader, what we want to do is empower everyone around us. And so there's an empowered person understands where power comes from. It comes from the inside. And so I think it's a lot of times, I work with this a lot in my personal relationship, and where like I think sometimes my partner gives me advice and I'll remind him that I don't like that. And I know what he's trying to do is just trying to help me out. But like, let's say I'm saying, hey, I'm not feeling well. Sometimes I just want to be heard. I don't need well, then you should take aspirin. Right. So it's like, okay, just know that I'm an adult. I'm an adult. I can make decisions for myself. A lot of times I'm just trying to share or communicate and be heard, and I don't want the advice. The advice feels disempowering. It feels dishonoring. And I know that sometimes, and that's why intentions sometimes it doesn't matter what the intention is. Like a lot of people will be like, well, my intention was to be great. I understand that. And your action still has a consequence. So just because your intention was good is not an excuse for behavior. You have to understand the action of your behavior and that it might not be empowering the people around you. So, when someone asks me for advice, a lot of times I'll ask them questions, and hopefully like in those questions, they can kind of come up with their own answer. So yeah, I think advice is really a dangerous thing.
I love that you walk alongside others when they're seeking advice versus giving immediate direction or giving an answer. And like you said, there is a very big difference in giving instruction in a job for a process. This is best practice, or this is what we do and how it works, versus I think you should do this. You should go do that for personal direction or advice. And it sounds to me like you position yourself to rather walk alongside someone, guiding them to their own advice versus just to offer it up, because that can be very disempowering. And over time, it can also completely remove their own self-power because they don't know how to make decisions for themselves. And so they will always come to you on what to do next. And that too is a very hard place to be when you don't know yourself. You don't know what you should do because you've always been told what to do by someone else.
Yeah. And I also think that like when your self-esteem is maybe not in the best place, you unconsciously try to have power over people. But when your self-esteem is actually in a healthy place, you don't want that. You don't want to have power over anyone. That it just isn't where you go, because you understand, like when you have self-esteem, like healthy self-esteem, you understand that we're all on the same boat here. Like there is no power over. And so, like someone with a healthy self-esteem really just wants you to have a healthy self-esteem too, honestly.
Yeah. They're rooting for you and they're cheering for you, no matter if it has any benefit on them, on you personally. You just want others to have the best for themselves, and you feel free in celebrating that and recognizing that.
Yeah, because people with like unhealthy self-esteem they hurt people unconsciously or consciously. They hurt people. And so it's like the safest place to be around to me is people with really healthy self-esteem. One of the reasons why probably I teach it. I want to be safe in the world.
Yes.
So I want you to
the world needs it.
I want you to
keep teaching.
Yeah, I want you to, I want everyone around me to have good self-esteem, so like I'm safe in the room. But no, honestly, it's like people with healthy self-esteem are the safest people to be around. They really
also is why, hands down, the evolution of leadership through your own journey got you to where you're at, because you recognized, I want to help build self-esteem in others because I've been in rooms that didn't feel safe and that lacked that. Being a leader is acknowledging that that problem exists and choosing to go do something about it to make it better without having direction or instructions to follow on how to do it. But the intention is, this is what I'm experiencing and I can do something to make it better. And I want to do that through helping other people. That is exactly why you are so well respected as a leader.
Thank you.
I know a theme throughout our conversation so far too has definitely highlighted a strength of yours is protecting boundaries even when it's hard. What does that look like in practice of daily life for you?
Protecting boundaries, even when it's hard, like my own or other people's, or both. I feel like it's the ability to call out when things need to be called out. I think there's sometimes I've felt like my boundaries were disrespected at my job, let's say. And so I've actually just pulled people aside in private and have basically said, I feel like my boundaries aren't being respected. And this is what I would love to see happen in the future. Hard conversation. I've had employees in the past, they no longer work for me, but if an employee of mine talks badly about another employee, I said, do we need to have a three-way sit down? Because there isn't going to be a behind someone's back talking. Not here. I'm not going to create a culture where someone else is talking badly about someone else. You need to be able to say it to this person's face, and they'll be like, oh no, I'm good. Okay. So I just don't put up with certain behaviors, and I let people know that.
Yeah. Well, I also want to acknowledge that when I shared with my best friend I was going to your studio, and I was telling her about different dynamics, and then I got to know different leaders in there, and I've gotten to know you really well. And every single time I share something, she's like, man, I'm so glad that that's the studio that you found, because that's not normal. That's not a typical, environment or a typical culture that you are getting to see. And it's attributed to how you lead your business and how you lead your people, what you choose to tolerate, what you choose to ignore, what you choose to address. And doing that in the right way has built a solid foundation and reputation and culture that people are honored to work at your studio. And I think that's an incredible fight that you probably had to do over and over and over again to build that credibility. But it is, bar none, something that does not exist everywhere, and it should. And it starts with the leaders and how they represent at the top and how they lead their people. So I appreciate all of the things that you have done to feed into your people and to your studio.
Thank you. I let people, I try to make like it's safe to come up to me and say, like, Diana, I don't agree with you. Like, so my studio manager is able to go, her and I have different brains, we think differently. She often is like, I don't agree with this. And sometimes she can communicate to me well enough where I'll go, okay, you win. You win. I hear you. Okay. Let's try it your way. I absolutely do that. And then there's sometimes when I hear her side, I hear my side, and I just say, you're going to have to just allow me to do it this way for now. I'm responsible for this place. I'm responsible for the bills. Like, if I really feel strongly about this. I know that we're not agreeing on it, but in a way, you're going to have to just accept that this is the way I want to do it. And, she'll be like, okay. So, I allow myself to be open too. I think that's important.
Speaking of culture and a culture of disagreeing, that is so important. And having people with different life experiences, goals, aspirations, oftentimes leaders are afraid to push back or to give advice or to say, like, hold on, are we thinking about all the complications that could actually come with this? Are we thinking of all angles? And allowing a culture where people can share their opinion and share what they think openly, and it be okay to disagree, is a culture that needs to grow everywhere. Like, it needs to copy paste in businesses everywhere. Because when it's just one way or the highway, businesses are set up for failure and they don't even know it yet. And so being able to embrace conflict or difference of opinions is really, really important for the longevity of a business.
Yeah, I also think like having someone who has a different viewpoint in you around you is super healthy, because it keeps things really honest. You don't want everyone to just be like, I agree with everything you say. I don't know. I mean, I think it makes someone stronger when you have someone around that's willing to go, I don't know. Let me question that.
Yeah, I completely agree. In regards to legacies and your legacy in the making and your legacy in the building, if you will, when students leave your studio or they leave your presence or they leave your leadership, how do you want them to feel from interacting with you?
I feel like one of the things is that I always want people to feel that I'm being present and authentic with them. And in that, I feel like what I'm trying to create is safety. I'd rather have people like around me that are authentic, therefore they feel safe, rather than phony and nice. Like like you don't have to be unkind when you're authentic, but there's like a difference when you feel like you have to be false and overact like a certain way that's not yourself. That I don't do. So if I'm having a hard day, I don't try to take it out on anyone, but I don't also try to pretend like I'm not having a hard day.
Yeah.
And in that way, I want people to feel safe to be themselves and also feel a little bit safe around me. Like it's okay to feel, what you're feeling. You don't have to cover it up. Like if you're sad, please be sad. Let yourself be who you are. And that, I don't know, that's just, I believe in that with all of my being.
I heard, I want to say back in college at one point, a stat that said 80% of success is showing up, meaning 20% is what you actually do once you're there. And I think about that all the time. 80%, you just got to show up. And what I've noticed about personally being in your presence or personally being in the studio is that 80% that it took to get me in the door or took to get me on the mat was 100% of my effort, but I might only have a certain amount of capacity that day. And it might be less than some, or I might show up and spitfire and try to prove something to myself and just like kick my own butt. But I think what I love is you acknowledge the fact of, I'm tired today, or kind of a rough day, and we power through, and you don't let that feeling spread onto others. You don't duplicate that feeling for them to take with them. You acknowledge it for what it is and keep it real. And so the 80% of showing up might only be a certain amount of capacity. And I just respect that you honor your capacity for yourself in the studio, which embodies and allows us to do the same as a student on the other end.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be anyone but who you are, right? Like,
I really think you have taught me that in a way that I didn't realize I didn't understand over the last year and a half.
I love that. Because you're just like a superstar to me. I just feel like you have it all. You got it all. But I know better than that, like I know we all have challenges, we all have gifts and all those things. But yeah, I always just, you're such a bright spirit and I love being around you. So thanks for being in my space.
Well, I love being around you. As we kind of shift gears towards wrap up here, I want to tap into some of the wisdom side of what I know you have. And I'm curious what you would tell the 24-year-old version of yourself whose opinion wasn't being considered. What would you tell that version of you now?
I would tell her to, I think, honestly, I think I wrote the high voltage life for her. And I think I would just say, get really good at communicating, get really good at feeling, get really good at all the skills that you need to develop for self-esteem. Get really good at that, all of those things, and everything else will be okay. I know for a fact that some of the traumas that I have endured in my life have been because I lacked boundaries. And not that I want to excuse other people's behaviors necessarily, but there are some people I really let in because I didn't have boundaries and I knew they were unhealthy people, right? So yeah, I would tell the 20-year-old self of mine to um get really good at communication, get really good at emotional availability, get really good at all of those things.
I love it.
Yeah.
I know that Carolyn Miss is a huge role model and has been a supporting guide for you in regards to writing and exploration of thoughts on paper. And there's one thing I heard you say, and it was, I have my quote down. It says, liars don't heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you would share how that applies to your own growth journey or your own growth in general.
I love that quote. It's so brutal.
Yes, it is. I literally have it on a sticky note on my computer because I was like, oh, I feel that. I need to keep that close.
Yeah, liars don't heal. Well, I think for the longest time, I was afraid to expose my imperfections. And there were a lot of times I was unable to because I felt like, oh my gosh, if someone saw that, maybe that was my fault. I can't blame someone else. But there is no healing in pointing your finger away from yourself. It's, um, I think the only way we can really heal is brutal honesty, loving honesty with ourselves is like when we can actually start tackling things. I mean, for years, I struggled with addiction and now, I can go like, oh, I'm an addict. And so I cannot take a drink. I cannot do a drug, because I'm an addict. And you know how afraid I was to say that for so long? I was terrified to say those words. Like, what would people think of me? It was almost like, how will this view of me be if I say that? Now I just go like, oh, it's okay if someone judges me. I mean, it's okay. I am an addict. I am an addict. I do have an issue. I do have an allergy with alcohol. I do. And so I have to remind myself that maybe that's why they say that in AA. Like, I'm Diana, I'm an alcoholic. It's okay to say that, so that I don't pretend that I'm not and that I can go ahead and have a drink.
Yeah.
So
it has so much power behind it. And I think owning who we are and what it is versus lying also supports healing in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because trying to lie to ourselves about it is also what gets us in trouble. And we test the limits and see like, well, this one time I can make an excuse and try. But the awareness that comes with, I know what happens if I try. And because I don't stop, I'm not even going to test the limit. That is owning your power, owning your awareness, owning yourself and your journey of where you're at and protecting that future version, best version of you that you want to continue to build and become. I just think that's so powerful.
Yeah. And I know we've talked before about like a lot of people, their desire to be right. And it's okay like to not be right. It's okay to go, oh, I made a mistake, or boy, I got that one wrong, or whatever. It's okay to not be perfect.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And own where you are.
Yeah.
And own where you were, where you are, and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And to just be yourself all the way through it.
Yeah. Human.
To bring us kind of to a close, I know we mentioned the 50-50 partnership throughout this entire discussion. And if someone on the other end of this is listening and they're in a 50-50 partnership right now, but they're feeling unheard, what is one thing that you would want them to hear or to know that could support them?
That you never have to feel stuck in a relationship that isn't respectful. That you can leave at any time. If someone is unwilling to listen to you and to honor your voice, you are not stuck. You could go out on your own. Like if you are a business owner and an entrepreneur, if you're not being honored where you're at, go do your own thing.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with, or anything that feels unsaid that you want to share as we wrap up?
I would just say, like, I'm not into advice, but if I could give one little piece, it would be self-esteem, self-esteem, self-esteem. Build it. Build your self-esteem in an authentic way, and you'll live a more fulfilling, happy life, period. I mean, it's just the key to everything.
Yes, you will. And if you need proof, I'm sitting right here because a year and a half ago, this girl was very different.
Yeah.
And Diana, honestly, before we go, I want to thank you for how you chose to show up today and for choosing to show up today. I want to acknowledge the intentionality that I see in yourself and even in your responses before you speak. It's not a hesitation. It's a mastery. And I see it all the time with any interaction at the studio or on other podcasts that I'm watching with you. It is true mastery. And I think that you've taught yourself the task of listening and responding with intentionality. It requires what you want your impact to be and what you want your words to create and what you want them to mean. And I respect so much that you value the weight of words and how you choose to use them. And I don't know if you even remember saying this to me, but I do want to share it as a thank you to you. When I stepped into the studio, I believe it was February of 2024, so about a year and a half ago, I spent the first 2 weeks of my guest pass in the studio on my mat, just crying and breathing and crying and breathing. And I didn't know why. And even before the 2-week trial period ended, I came up to the front desk and I remember I said to you, I think I need to be here. I don't know why, but I need to sign up because I need to keep coming back here to figure out why. And you looked at me and you smiled and you just said, I really hope you stick with it. And I hope that you choose to keep showing up. And the weight of that one sentence, I hope you choose to keep showing up, I wake up to every day. Like I literally am laying in bed and I'll open my eyes regardless of my amount of capacity that I feel I have that day. I just tell myself, just choose to show up. Just choose to show up. And it's to show up for myself. And I want to leave my audience and you that when you choose to show up and you choose to learn and you choose to grow and you choose to do it for your loved ones, for your friends and your family and your team, that is all amazing. But the most important one to show up for is for yourself. And that's where the magic happens. And that is a gift that you gave me. So Diana, thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for showing up for 25 years in the world of yoga. I think that your impact is immeasurable from anybody that you come into contact with. You leave growth in the lives of others to go explore for themselves. And there is so much magic in that. And I'm grateful that I got to experience it so far. And I can't wait to see where else it takes me. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me that gift too.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Well, as we close out this episode with Diana, thank you for listening to this episode on the Legacy Lounge. Check out the show notes and connect with her, follow along Legacy Fulfilled, and share this episode with a leader who might need to hear it. Until next time, I'm your host, Brin'na Rollins-Williams, encouraging you to lead with purpose and embrace fulfillment because your legacy depends on it. That's it for this episode of Legacy Lounge, a podcast dedicated to empowering you to lead with purpose. Remember, leadership begins with you. When you're connected to your values, strengths, and authentic self, you show up powerfully for your team, businesses, and everyone you lead. To authentically lead others, you must first lead yourself. I challenge you to consider, how are you investing in your personal growth to create a legacy that you envision? Thank you for joining me in the Legacy Lounge. If this episode sparked any thoughts or inspired action, I'd love to hear from you. I'm your host, Brin'na Rollins-Williams. Connect with me on LinkedIn or other socials, and let's continue the conversation. Remember, your legacy is built one intentional step at a time.